Welcome back to America Right Now. The Department of Justice has unsealed the latest indictment against former President Donald Trump. He is facing 37 counts, 31 of which for willful document retention. He's also being charged with obstruction of justice, making false statements to the FBI, grand jury, and others. So what is next for the former president's legal team? Let's bring in our legal panel to start off our day. Joining us now is the senior counsel for the Lawfare Project, Gerard Filitti. Also with us is criminal defense attorney and adjunct professor of law at Cornell University, Randy Zellin. And I'd like to welcome in our very special guest for the show, attorney and business analyst Krisha Lenzo. All right, folks, special counsel Jack Smith discussing the Trump indictment yesterday. Watch.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
So, Gerard, I want to start with you. I think a lot of people out there are wondering why. I think a lot of them will conclude that this is in some fashion political, but there is a case now. So what stood out to you in this document?
Well, what stood out to me in this document was first and foremost the way it was constructed, step by step, rebuting pretty much everything that Trump has said so far publicly and making a case that the real issue is that he withheld documents, that he held on to classified documents that he should not have had. And what's laid out in the indictment is that he had knowledge, or he seems to have had knowledge, that these documents were still classified, that he could not declassify them post his presidency, and that he should not be showing them to people. The rest of the charges all stem from those. And if he can address those as a formative matter, then we have a way to see what the defense will be. But we have to set aside politics and focus on the law. Yes, it certainly seems that Trump is being singled out in a way that no other target has been. We haven't seen charges like this. But we need to look at what the case now becomes.
Randy, the former president is maintaining his innocence as a criminal defense attorney. Same question to you. If you're Team Trump, what are the concerning aspects of this, and what are the strengths that you have perhaps going into a defense?
Well, certainly working backwards. Strengths are always going to be, I'm being singled out. This has never happened before. We don't do this to former presidents. I didn't do anything wrong. I had the power to declassify merely by blinking. If I'm Team Trump, my biggest worry is they just took the wind out of my sails for that very reason. Because the public has been saying, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? He wasn't trying to sell these to a foreign country. We weren't in jeopardy. And while the government doesn't have to prove motive, they just did. He did this to show off. He did this to be a wise guy. So when he invites people over to Mar-a-Lago, he can say, look, I'm the coolest person in the world. Look what I have. Unfortunately for Team Trump, that is a crime.
Well, I think that's why this is going to be so complex, because there's a political angle here, but there's also the legal angle. And regardless, and I think that you're both correct in that people are going to say, were these documents really that damaging to national security? Probably not. Of all of the documents, I only counted 20 TS documents. The rest of them were secret, very, very low-level classified documents. But the fact that they were documents is what DOJ is not going to argue the content. They're going to argue the fact that there were documents, and then what he said over the last number of months since the grand jury was impaneled about the situation. Gerard, what are the next steps here? DOJ is saying that they want a speedy trial. What are they going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in order to get a conviction here?
They're going to have to prove pretty much what they laid out in the indictment, that Trump had these documents, that he should not have had these documents, that he was engaged in a conspiracy, that he tried to obstruct justice by denying the government access to these documents. Now, working backwards, there are many things that Trump has going for him on the obstruction charges. His own personality and his history of prevaricating on what to do speaks more to his style rather than to intent to withhold or to obstruct. But the ultimate issue are the documents themselves. And this is something that Trump's legal team is going to have to go into each one, challenge each one, and basically set out what Trump has tried to claim all along, is that he had the power to declassify them and that he exercised that power.
Yeah, and then they're going to have to prove, at least for a number of these documents, that he didn't declassify them, or he had not intended to declassify them when he was president. Randy, Trump has made changes to his legal defense team. He's brought in Todd Blanche, who sat by his side when he was dealing with the case against Alvin Bragg in New York. There are two unnamed attorneys referenced in the indictment. Did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me at all, because let's face it, who knows more about what goes on than the attorneys? So to the extent that the government can try to wreck the attorney-client privilege by going what's under the crime fraud exception, in other words, my attorneys, whether they knew it or not, helped me further this crime, that is a huge problem for Team Trump. That and the fact that he talks about weaponization. Nobody is guilty of weaponizing the government more than former President Trump. The fealty, the you have to be loyal to me, you have to do what I say. He did that to Comey. He did that to Sessions. That is what he does to everyone. His demanding of loyalty will be part of his undoing.
I want to bring in Krisha. You went to law school. You're an analyst. Former President Trump thinks this is actually going to help him politically. I want to talk. These guys have been talking about the legal. Let's talk about the politics. What are your thoughts so far?
Well, I think the legal and the politics are very much tied here because, as we're seeing, there has been an unequal application of the law. We have a current sitting president who's in the exact same position as former President Trump. We have a former First Lady, Secretary of State, Senator Hillary Clinton, who did basically the same thing, and there was no ramifications. So if you were going to look at what we're seeing with President Trump, I think the American public does realize that this is very much a power grab by the DOJ and also by the FBI. We saw clearly that it's not a coincidence that this indictment came out around the exact same time that Joe Biden, we received information about potential allegations as to whether or not he was bribed in Ukraine and many other places. Right. So I think this is all way more than what we're seeing with President Trump, and definitely a power grab by the Democrats, who are really using this to obscure other issues such as the crisis at the border, such as crime, inflation. I mean, clearly those are the main issues here.
All right. And Gerard, one last question to you. We haven't talked about Walt Nauta, who is former President Trump's personal aide. He was indicted as well. He also has 38 counts against him. Does he really become the focus for this prosecution, to try to flip him against his boss and make a deal now?
Well, I'm sure that any prosecutor worth his salt will try to flip him and get his testimony. Ultimately, though, you need if you're alleging a conspiracy, you need to have a co-conspirator. And this is the person who's been with Trump the most, the closest, and acted on Trump's directions. So he is the logical choice, and the one who is easier to identify, and quite frankly, probably the easier one to flip.
All right. We are definitely going to be talking a lot more about this. The arraignment is going to be on Tuesday in Miami. And, of course, they're saying that they want this to go to trial in the fall. Thank you so much, Gerard Filitti, Randy Zellen, Krisha Lenzo. You're going to stick around with us. Thanks so much, guys. All right, and we want to hear from you about the federal indictment of former President Donald Trump. Do you think he's guilty or innocent? Vote now in this exclusive Newsmax poll by texting Trump to 39747. Cast your vote now, and we will bring you the results. All right, straight ahead. The phenomenon causing our kids